up, Space Cowboy? How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. My cat trying to mess with stuff on my table over here, and I don't know, like we're trying to go live. I'm like, please, like I got everything ready. But man, I'm doing great. It's great chopping it up with you again, as we're getting closer to the start of training camp and well, I think mini camp already happened, but yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. And I just want to also say happy Sunday morning to everybody coming in and tuning into the live. And you want to know what's funny? I work from Tuesday to Saturday, so pretty much Saturday for me. It's the start of the weekend for me, so I can't complain about anything right now as it is. So yeah, today we got some interesting topics. We got Trevor Lawrence signed his deal the other day. So we're going to talk about what effect that has on Dak Prescott's upcoming deal. We're going to be talking about the rookie class and who's going to have the most impact on the rookie class. And we're also going to be talking about the wide receiver 3 spot for the Cowboys and who could potentially be filling that role. So automatically off the bat, Trevor Lawrence this past week signed a 5-year, $275 million contract worth $55 million a year. It's the highest quarterback contract in NFL history, if I'm not mistaken. $275 million. What did Burrow sign for? He signed for 255.
I believe it was 255 if I saw the numbers correctly as I pull it up here. Let me see. I believe so. I think it's 255 I'm seeing here because I'm looking at it.
He signed for 5 years, 275. Joe Burrow.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So Trevor Lawrence, his contract is right there with his.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, like the Cowboys have a quarterback that is up for an extension right now. That maybe he gets extended, maybe he doesn't. What effect do you think this has on Dak Prescott's contract?
It just pushes the number up, honestly, and I think that it doesn't have to include the Dallas Cowboys at all. Like, there will be a team that will pay Dak Prescott market value because that's just how the market is in the NFL, right? And so I'm thinking that you're probably looking now at a contract that's probably like 5 years, depending on guarantees, like 280 to 300 plus. And that's not like out of the realm of possibility, or it's like not crazy, because here's the thing: when you look at the Trevor Lawrence contract, it's, of course, you're signing him like with his rookie contract still going on, but when you look at how it is, like, he's not going to have like a $47 million cap hit until 2028. So for the Cowboys, they can structure the deal where if they were to, and I've been pushing the envelope where you should have signed him last year, because then you had the 2 years of the extension that you could add on the contract. And so the Jaguars and all these other teams are doing that. The Cowboys are like, well, they're prioritizing Dak's contract, but, what are they doing? Like, is prioritizing, like, we're going to wait till the end. And not to go super long with this, but to that final point that I have is, if they don't sign a deal during the preseason, they're not going to do a deal until the end of the season. So that's something to keep in mind.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing, right? I feel like for anybody who doesn't want to sign Dak Prescott to 65 million, if you don't want to, or 60 million, if you don't want to sign him for $60 million, guess what? His price by this time next season, well, off season next year, is probably going to be around 65 million. Like, he's going to have another big year this year. This is going to be an offense that is heavily reliant on its passing attack. CeeDee Lamb's only going to get better. Jake Ferguson's only going to get better. Another year under Mike McCarthy's offense. Hopefully they do a better job with, opening things up for Brandon Cooks and getting him more involved in the offense. Hopefully somebody else steps up in that tight end 2 spot or wide receiver 3 spot. And, there's a very real possibility that Dak Prescott, again, is in the MVP conversation. Again, could be a 2-time All-Pro by the time next offseason rolls around. And you're going to be paying him even more than what you're going to be paying him right now. So, there's going to be sticker shock when if Dak Prescott signs a contract before the start of the season. But ultimately, it's not going to be a bad thing because you need a quarterback. This this league has shown you that, look at a team like the San Francisco 49ers, Kyle Shanahan in particular. Kyle Shanahan, to me, this might sound like a hot take, is the best coach in football. But every time he's gotten to the Super Bowl, you look at Atlanta in 2017. Who did he play? Brady and Belichick. Who did he have? Matt Ryan, who was having a really good season, but there was a clear difference in who was the better quarterback. You go to 2020 when they played the Kansas City Chiefs. He had Jimmy Garoppolo. He was going up against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. 2024, he had Brock Purdy. He was going up against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. There was a clear advantage in their quarterback, and that's the reason why they lost that football game. So when you have a quarterback like Dak, is it pretty all the time? It's not. There's some games where it's like, all right, this looks a little rough, but I would also push back on people and say, hey, the reason why the team looks rough when Dak's playing bad is because this team goes how Dak goes. They win games because of Dak Prescott. It's not the other way around. I know there was like a narrative that, the defense is going to win this team games. As a matter of fact, I think the defense lost more games for the team than we originally expected that they were going to. So when you have a player like Dak Prescott who's elevating the team the way he has for the past few seasons here, it's fine to pay him that big money. And if you move off Dak Prescott, who are you going to get to replace him? I mean, I wrote an article on Substack. We'll go over that and go over some of the options that I brought up. But, there's not many great replacements for him to where it's like, all right, this is good for the cap, and we're bringing in a really solid player as well. It's you kind of have to pick between the two.
And I think what screws the Cowboys is that if Dak Prescott...
Hold up. I think you're...
yeah, I was muted.
Yeah. No, you're good. You're good.
I think the other thing is that if you let Dak Prescott walk, which, again, I'm okay with whatever the team wants to do. The problem is you're going to have a massive cap hit for not only next year, but also the year after that, which handicaps your options of what you can do in terms of, like, hey, maybe you want to get a bridge quarterback in free agency, hypothetically, right? And we'll go over those options that you mentioned. It's going to be harder to do that because, the quarterback market is not as cheap as people make it out to be. And then you think, oh, well, what about Trey Lance? And I remember we talked about it on the previous show where it's like, even if Trey Lance shows something and you want him to be the bridge quarterback, you're going to have to pay him like $15 million or around there. That's just how it is. Because you got to be like, okay, this dude's going to be starting for us, and we're paying him on the potential that he can be something. That's the whole thing, is you're paying these deals off of the potential you're going to get this type of player for this period of time. That's all you're paying the person for. And then even when you draft, think about it this way. If we expect the Cowboys to win the NFC East again or get back to the playoffs, and let's just say they win a playoff game, and now you're picking like 26 or 27, you're not taking a QB1 there. I don't think that this upcoming draft class really has anybody that I'm really excited about. We'll see. We'll see how progression goes for their collegiate seasons, but yeah, I'm really curious to hear about those options, like what you were looking at.
Oh, definitely. And I'll present that right now. Let me go present that. Okay, 5 options at quarterback for the Cowboys in 2025 and beyond. I started the article off by talking about signing Dak Prescott to a long-term extension. A few of the things that I brought up his cap hits over the next 4 seasons. You're going to be paying him $40 million in 2025, $14 million in 2026, 2027, $2 million, in 2028, $1 million. And now here's the thing. I went over the Cowboys cap space as well. Maybe I didn't go over in this part of the article, but they have $60 million, $65 million in cap space for the 2025 season. But that includes a $40 million dead cap hit for Dak Prescott, which will be reverted to like his just regular cap hit number if he is signed. And they already have a $21 million 5th-year option cap hit for Micah Parsons. The only one of these 3 big players that they're supposed to sign that isn't under contract for them in 2025 is CeeDee Lamb. So, once that number gets there, the amount of salary cap space we're going to have in that season is going to go down a little bit, which is fine. But then when you look at the salary cap outlook for the Cowboys in 2026, I think they have like $178 million in cap space, with still paying Dak Prescott $14 million on the cap. And then in 2027, they have $256 million in cap space. So, this whole notion that Jerry and Steven are putting forward that, we got to worry about the pie here. And, we got to make sure that everything fits under the pie. They have plenty of pie in the next 3 seasons. They have plenty of it. So, a few of the options that I brought up was, one, extending Dak Prescott. 2, Trey Lance. I was not in favor of this at all, just because, we're hearing reports that he's struggling in the mandatory minicamp and the OTAs and stuff like that. And he needs a new contract as well. So you're going to have to pay him. Let's just say you pay him $15 million to be your quarterback in 2025. You're paying Dak a $40 million cap hit, and you're paying Trey Lance $15 million. So combine that right there. That's $55 million going towards essentially the quarterback position. Like if you think about it, you're paying 2 quarterbacks a combined $55 million, and the lesser of the 2 players is your quarterback.
Right, and that's and to just touch on that, like, I would say, like, if they were looking at possibly giving Trey Lance, like, an extension, it might be, like, a 2 or 3 year deal where it's, like, $45-50 million, and people will say, well, on paper, that's a steal, but at the same time, like, you're paying Trey Lance, again, the expectation that this dude will be something, or at minimum, a solid quarterback for you, when, in fact, he hasn't been playing well. And I know we're talking about practice, of course, and we'll see how he looks in live game settings, but if this dude is not good in preseason, and I think the Cowboys are banking on him being good in preseason football, now Dak Prescott has just taken control of every aspect of how this contract goes, which we kind of talked about before, and it's been said, that's going to be how it is for him, because literally if he has another MVP caliber season, dude, he could ask for 70 million. I don't know, but again, people got to realize that if you don't have a quarterback, you do not have a chance in this league. So, yeah.
And that's what teams pay for. And that's what teams pay for ultimately. Like when people say, well, what has he done in the playoffs? Like, well, the fact is you're getting to the playoffs with this guy every year. Mm-hmm. So, teams value that. And it's like, hey, you get to the playoffs, unfortunately, luck hasn't went the Cowboys' way these past few seasons here. But if you keep, running it back, keep going forward, keep, just keep giving yourself a chance. I do believe in ultimately you will stumble across a year where things just go your way, but if, I look at that Washington football team in 2020, they had the Buccaneers on the ropes in that wild card playoff game, but their quarterback was so damn bad that he didn't really give him a chance. If you have Kirk Cousins in that game, I mean, we're talking about a completely different ball game there, and it's like, that's Kirk Cousins. That's not, he's a very damn good. I think Kirk Cousins is, criminally underrated, but, to talk about some of the other options, I brought up drafting a quarterback, and then I went over some of the quarterbacks and where PFF has them ranked in their big board. Got Carson Beck, quarterback from Georgia. He's their 11th ranked prospect. He's the number 1 ranked quarterback in the draft. So expect him to go somewhere within that like 5 to 10 range. You have 8 All-Pros on this team returning. You're probably not going to be drafting within the top 10. Shedeur Sanders, expect him to be a top 10 pick. Quinn Ewers, probably middle of the first round, even though PFF here has him ranked as the 32nd overall prospect in the draft. Jalen Milroe is where you start to get, a realistic opportunity of drafting a quarterback wherever they end up drafting. And then Drew Aller is, I don't think he's really that good.
No.
And he's a back half of the second round talent according to PFF here. So if you do want to draft a quarterback, and there's this kid at LSU, who's going to be their starting quarterback this year. There's a lot of people who think that he could potentially have a breakout year. And if that's the case, maybe he ends up going top 10 as well. So, you never know about that. But when we just look at if you're projecting and looking out in advance, these options at quarterback, they're just, I mean, I'd be interested in Jalen Milroe if you can, and we'll talk about it later on in the once we go over the article. I'd be interested in Jalen Milroe because I do think that there's untapped potential there as a passer, but you got to make sure that you get somebody in front of him that could teach him, and you got to coach him up the right way. And that's my take on potentially drafting a quarterback.
Yeah, for sure. I think that you're going to have someone just come out of nowhere. But the other part of it is the QB tax that happens in the NFL draft. Like, I guarantee you that, like, if these are the 5 dudes, like 4 or 3 of them are going to go top 10 because that's just how it is. Now, the good news is that you just had this most recent draft where you had 6 quarterbacks go. And so next year, you're not going to be in a situation where it's like, okay, like there are some teams that will probably be in the quarterback market. Like I wouldn't be shocked if the Giants are in that. I wouldn't be shocked if, let's just say for this example, the Cowboys are in it because, Dak Prescott walks, right? But then you look at the rest of the NFC. I mean, I don't really see, I think the Saints maybe could be in the quarterback room. I'm trying to think what else. Then you look at the West, yeah, I mean, maybe Seattle, but, like, you kind of, like, the thing is a lot of these teams that might need a quarterback, I don't know, like, they might just be like, we're fine as is, and that's, like, for me, like, if you're going to get a quarterback, get the best one, and that's where I personally want to see how these guys pan out. I think that Shadur Sanders is, going to be QB1 when it's all said and done, if he continues his growth. Quinn Ewers is someone to keep an eye out on. Just because with him returning, I think that he'll be defaulted unless he has a terrible season. But
which I don't think will happen. Texas is really good.
I think they'll be fine. And then Jalen Milroe, I mean, also as a Penn State guy with Drew Aller, I'll just quickly say no, he is not. No, he ain't it. I'm not touching him. But Jalen Milroe is perplexing because I think that he has. He kind of reminds me a lot of a guy that you would possibly get in a Jalen Hurts, where it's like if you develop him, you might get something there. But again, he has to go into the right spot. But yeah, that's just my take on these these quarterbacks.
So another aspect I brought up, or another option that I brought up, is sign a quarterback in free agency. Now I'm going to tell you right now. If the Cowboys move on from Dak Prescott, that guy that I have all the way on the right, I think that's your quarterback for 2025.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the reason why I say this. Russell Wilson is getting, I think, let me go over the cap hit from the Broncos. I have it here. He was my number 5 option on this. So he's going to be owed $32 million. The likelihood that he would take a veteran minimum like he is in Pittsburgh is a lot more likely than, people may. I mean, he's already taking that salary this year. So I think that's your quarterback just because you're already paying Dak Prescott on the cap $40 million and you would pay Russell Wilson, like $2 million, if that.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's your quarterback in 2025 if Dak Prescott's not your quarterback. I honestly believe that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked at that. I think that I could honestly see them just going after, again, like the bridge quarterback where you're paying it maximum maybe like 15. But the thing that worries me is like you look at deals like Derek Carr, for example, and it's like you're paying them dudes like 35 over 4. And it's like that's where I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's going to be a lot more. But like that's where... Like, it all comes back to, like, signing Dak Prescott's ultimately going to be the best deal for the Cowboys long term. Like, I know that people get scared of the big contract, but I think a lot of these other, people that go out here and report these numbers, they're doing people disservices because they aren't talking about how salary caps are impacted by contracts. I don't think Dak's going to have a fully guaranteed contract where you have a $60 million cap hit every goddamn year. No, that's not what... No, absolutely not. I think that the thing is people have this mindset where it's like, hey, we're going to be paying a quarterback all this money, and whether you like it or not, Like, if you want the Cowboys to contend, he's going to be your best option because, yeah, you can go to the mystery box, like I call it, with the NFL draft, and you can get lucky and get a CJ Stroud, right? And you can get that next dude, but you know what's going to end up happening is you're going to end up having to pay that dude down the road. And that's the part that bugs me is, like, I understand we haven't had playoff success. And there have been games where he hasn't played well, that being Dak Prescott, but also the team hasn't played well. But at the end of the day, you're getting there. You're doing all these things, and I understand that we don't like the end result, but you have a chance at least. And you look at how these other teams get to the Final Fours and the winning the championship, having good defense and running the football, which the Cowboys struggled with last year. That's why Dak Prescott was literally your entire source of offense.
Yes.
So
yes, and I want to go over some of these names because. Part of this exercise was to inform people on potential options, but to also tell people, like, these are your options. All right, let me go over these names. I'm going to be honest with you. Daniel Jones, to me, if the Cowboys move on from Dak Prescott and Daniel Jones, the quarterback, hear me out. I think the Cowboys would still be a playoff team. And here's the reason why I say this. I think Daniel Jones is a lot better than people give him credit for. The Giants suck. They're bad. Their roster has been the worst in football ever since he's gotten drafted. Their offensive line's been one of the worst in football ever since he's gotten drafted. He has nobody to throw the football to. He hasn't had anybody to throw the football to in his time in New York. I mean, you look at that year in 2022 where, Mike Kafka was doing a really good job calling the plays. Saquon had a really good season, but Daniel Jones played very well as well that season. He didn't put up gaudy numbers, but he was throwing the ball to Darius Slayton, and Richie James was his number 2 receiver. Richie James played with Kansas City this year, and he had 110 yards on like 10 catches. That's Kansas City, whose wide receiver core everybody knows sucks. Daniel Jones has never been given a fair chance in New York, in my personal opinion. And if they want to move, I honestly think he's like maybe like the 50th problem with the Giants. Their front office is not good. Their roster is not good. Their coaching staffs, ever since Daniel Jones has been there, have not been good. And, we want to talk about playoff performances. Daniel Jones went into Minnesota, and I think he was 25 of 34 for 300 yards, 78 yards on the ground as well, with 2 touchdowns, no interceptions on the road in a playoff game with the type of roster that the Giants had that season. I think he gets, criticized to an extreme extent, and I don't think he's nearly as bad as people say he is. And as a matter of fact, I actually think he's good. He just hasn't been given the opportunity.
I think his development got curtailed because when you look at what he did in his rookie year, you saw elements that, hey, we got something here if you were New York. And then the problem was then you went to Jason Garrett as your offensive coordinator. You had Joe Judge, and you didn't have a staff. It's also the same reason, like I see Mac Jones on here. It's another reason why Mac Jones and him are kind of in the same tier of young quarterbacks where I don't want to throw Justin Fields because, I think he's a lot younger into his NFL career, and I think that, honestly, he might be the QB of the future for the Steelers. Who knows? But I look at those two guys and their similar story arcs when it comes to their careers. Where rookie years, they were impressive, but then you look at what happened afterwards. Those teams did no favors to them, basically treating them like bridge quarterbacks and just throwing them out there to die, and their coordinators didn't help them in their development. That's why, and from what I understand, the Cowboys had interest in Mac Jones during the 2021 NFL draft process before the Dallas Cowboys decided to sign Dak Prescott. Daniel Jones, I think that you get yourself a guy that's more mobile. But I don't know. I think that it would just come down to what you would be looking to pay these dudes, and especially if Mac Jones just sits on the bench the whole year. I wouldn't be shocked if they go after him. If that's that's the option out of all these that you're showing.
Yeah, it's not. They're not great options. They're not. But I do think I look at Justin Fields and I say hey, maybe Russell Wilson has a good year in Pittsburgh, and they say hey, we kind of like the short-term window that this guy gives us, and maybe we roll with that. Or maybe Justin Fields gets there and they're like, Russell Wilson, see you later. But Geno Smith is another guy that has an out in his contract. We'll see what happens there. None of these guys are a better option than Dak Prescott. And on top of that, you're going to pay them and pay Dak Prescott as well. And then the fifth option that I brought up was trading for a quarterback. Some of the names I brought up were, Kirk Cousins is a name I brought up because they drafted Penix, and Penix goes out there in the preseason and shows some real stuff. And if he gets playing time throughout the course of the season, maybe Kirk is out for a game or two with an injury and he shows some real promise. I could see Atlanta saying, hey, we got a quarterback here. We're going to move off Cousins. And if that's the case, hey, I think that becomes somewhat of a realistic option. They're going to have to make the cap number work. That's something that the cap people over the Cowboys, they'll have to discuss that. Kyler Murray, I'm more open to this option than any of the options that we've really brought up, just because he's young. I think Kyler Murray's a good quarterback. And I think that there is a little bit more room to run there with Kyler Murray. Matthew Stafford, the reason why I bring this up is because he's on the last 2 years of his contract. And if the Rams have, a setback season here, I think they might look to move on from Matthew Stafford if they have a high enough draft pick to go draft a quarterback. Derek Carr becomes interesting because they drafted a quarterback in the third round. Maybe that guy, shows up and performs. And then this one is the most interesting to me. Hendon Hooker. I say this because the Lions just paid Jared Goff. They drafted Hendon Hooker in the third round of the 2023 draft. Remember, the Cowboys were interested in Hendon Hooker. And I do believe I love Ben Johnson as a coordinator. I think he's fantastic. And we saw the leaps that Jared Goff took as a quarterback under Ben Johnson. And, if Hendon Hooker is getting that same development, maybe you could have an opportunity to trade third, fourth round pick to go get Hendon Hooker. He's on a cheap contract, so that's going to, help you out with, a potential cap hit that Dak Prescott would have, dead cap hit that he would have. So what do you think of these names that I brought up?
I think that for me, it's just the high cap hit you have with these dudes, except for Hendon Hooker, of course, because he's under a rookie contract. And it's like, to me, you're not going to get the same production out of a Dak Prescott. But to me, like, if it were me, and let's just say, like, hey, Space Dak is walking, you're not going to have him back. All right, that's fine. I think if it were me, I would just trade for Hendon Hooker, if that's a possibility, and just rebuild the whole roster at that point. You get a young guy. I mean, he is an older, like, he was an older rookie. I think he's like 26 or 27 now. But, like, still, like, you go get a guy like him. You see what you got, and then you just go from there. I understand, like, the Kyler Murray talk, but but the short quarterbacks, the Cowboys have a type for their quarterback. They like those dudes that are relatively tall. They can, sling the ball. Like, that's their type. And so I think that that's what I'm looking at. Derek Carr, like, epitome of just like, okay, he's solid, but like, you're not getting anything else out of that. But for the price point, no. I would say for Kirk Cousins, I think that I wouldn't see him get traded unless like Michael Penix has like a CJ Stroud type year or a Dak Prescott type rookie year where like he's really good and like he has the play, and it's like we don't really have a reason. I mean, I felt like the reason they drafted Michael Penix was just like because of the tampering situation, but they like luckily didn't lose their first round pick. I think they lost like a fifth. So
Rich McKay did work with that, man.
Oh my god, right? But like, shoo, I think that this is again, like none of these options, like, not to be too long-winded here, but like I think the part that in my brain where it's like I'm trying to see like, okay, can we justify moving on from Dak Prescott? Like including the playoff like lack of success. I think the problem is that with how much you're paying him, and then how much you're going to have to deal with the repercussions of not paying him, and the timeline of then having to pay the next quarterback, it's like pointless to me. I think that that's the part that bugs me. And look, I'm not saying like Dak's perfect. I'm not saying that he's the best quarterback in the NFL. But what I am going to say for you is that he is a top 10 quarterback in this league. I think that he is definitely one of the biggest focal points for why your offense was humming last year as you go back and watch. But at the same time, I think that it's just a huge indication that this Cowboys team needs to be able to do the things that other postseason teams do, and that is run the football and play good defense. And like we saw in the playoff game, they never really had the opportunity to run the football, right?
Nope.
But their defense let them down, and other things like, like looking at where you're at with this roster is not to be in a state of rebuild. This is a team that's contending or attempting to contend, air quote. But the other thing, and I appreciate Stephen White in the chat bringing it up, is that you also got to factor in the other players like CeeDee Lamb, for example, right? Like CeeDee Lamb might not want to get an extension without Dak Prescott being on this team. You know what I mean? And so that's where I'm like, if you look at how the team's built, it's supposed to be built around him and for his strengths. And if you just say, yeah, Dak, we don't want to have you as the quarterback because we don't want to pay you or whatever the case may be, then we run into this problem of, okay, now the whole roster needs to be changed because I don't know how people are going to look at that. We don't know. I mean, it's always a game of what if, but still. So
one thing I wrote in this article was that another angle you have to consider when it comes to moving on from Prescott is the very real possibility that you would be significantly downgrading at the quarterback position while also having incredible players like Micah Parsons, CeeDee Lamb, Tyler Smith, Jake Ferguson, Trayvon Diggs, and Deron Bland all entering their primes. Out of the 6 players I mentioned, all of them are 25 years or younger, and 5 of the 6 have been awarded All-Pro honors. The only one who has yet to be on an All-Pro team is Jake Ferguson, and if he continues to progress the way he has, it won't be long before he finds himself on an All-Pro team. I believe if the Cowboys aren't able to extend Prescott or find a worthy successor, this will be another batch of incredibly talented Cowboy players to never reach a conference championship game.
yeah, no, and that's another point. Like that kind of goes back to my point of like the timeline, where it's like with quarterbacks, they enter their primes in their 30s typically, and that's when you start seeing them play at an elite level if they get to that point. Or like that's like if you have a good quarterback, typically they turn into a great or elite one, depending on like the player. If you were to have this core for 4 years and you say, okay, there's no results, completely understandable, because then Dak Prescott's going to be like 35, 34 in, let's just say 4 to 5 years. Well, he'll be like 35, 36, something around there. And then it's a lot more feasible to have like, okay, we can move on from him type thing. Again, it's just like with where we're positioned with how they've constructed this roster, and also the fact that this team doesn't do anything in free agency. They don't do any trades. They strictly built through the draft. Dude, they're like, I don't think Cowboys fans are set for a full-on rebuild as much as they say they are. I don't really care either way what they do, because honestly, like, I've been checked out of this team for some time, because it's like I'm just in wait and see what happens, because not a lot has happened in this offseason. But I think that what's probably going to end up happening is they'll have like a 2014 season where no one thinks that they're going to be good. They'll be good, whether they win the division or not, whatever. They'll win a playoff game. They'll lose a close one in the divisional round, and then they'll bring back McCarthy. They'll bring back Dak Prescott. They'll start re-signing their dudes, and then it's just a matter of what can you do from there. And I mean, they're close. Like, I don't think that they're far off from, again, getting to the title game. You only have to win 1 or 2 games depending on where you're seated, right? And also, it's by matchups, right? I thought that last year Green Bay was going to be a tough matchup. I'm not just saying that because hindsight's 2020. I said that before the game. I said that this. I said
that too.
This is going to be the toughest game that they play, and if they and I felt like had they beat Green Bay, they probably would have beaten Detroit, and whatever the fuck happens in the title game.
I wanted to play the Rams. I wanted to play the Rams in the first round.
Yeah, and I felt the same way. Like, I didn't like to an extent. Like, I don't care who they play, because you're gonna have to play someone that you don't like. But hey, I like what they did this draft. You got the offensive line sort of set up now, because you want to run the football. You got players that you probably hope help you run the football more. I wouldn't be shocked if they traded for a running back, or they're looking in the running back market. Javonte Williams, the guy from Denver. Don't be shocked if the Cowboys take a look at him if he's released. But nah, man, I think that's where it's at with Dak Prescott. Just sign him. There's no point in playing this whole thing.
You know, another thing that I like to look at things from a macro perspective. I don't look at just, the Cowboys choked. That's what even though this past year they choked.
Yeah.
There's no escaping that. I will not sit here and tell anybody anything different.
Right.
But, you know, when you look at this team and the way they progressed since 2020, you know, 2020, they weren't a good football team. Even with Dak Prescott playing his ass off, they were going to be a 9-win team if he continued to play that season. Mm-hmm. But, you know, then you go from you're a 6-win team, or if Dak Prescott played the entire season, you would have been probably a 9-ish win team, to now you're a 12-win team the next season. And the team wasn't perfect. There were some holes in the team. I don't believe that's an instant where they choked. I mean, San Francisco played the number 1 schedule in football that year. They were way better than their record indicated, and the Cowboys drew the worst matchup they could probably draw in that first round. And they lost to what we found out to be a really good team, because they went into Green Bay the next week and they won that game as well.
But no one wants to talk about that.
And nobody wants to talk about Aaron Rodgers' performance in that game either, but I'll just leave that there. And then the next year, they won. They got the luck of the draw in the first round. They beat the Buccaneers, beat the brakes off them, went into San Francisco, and they lost a game against a really good defense. This is something I hate about football discourse. This is something I hate about football discourse. Stop saying that because you lost to a good football team that you choked. You just lost to a good football team. Sometimes you lost to a really, really damn good football team.
Like, think about this. This is what's crazy. Not to cut you off, Cowboys beat. What's crazy?
No, you're good.
Think about this. So in the Mike McCarthy era, right? You've played. Okay, so you played a team that went to the NFC title game. Went to the NFC title game because, of course, you're in a game that sends you to it. And the one time that I could say they reasonably choked was this last one, where you lost in the first round, embarrassingly, first 2. But, like, that's the same thing with me. Is like, that's why I don't get mad if you lose to a team like San Francisco. I'm not, like, justifying, like, play that happens in the game, right? Like, if Dak plays bad, yeah, I'm not gonna fucking sit here and be like, oh my god, Dak Prescott did nothing wrong, he did everything right.
Yeah.
Like, no, of course not. He didn't play well in those games. However, when we look at those games, look at it this way, right? Defensively, they had missed opportunities. Like, no one wants to talk about how Micah Parsons doesn't, like, make an impact. I understand why. Like, if you go back and watch the film, they scheme for him properly. Oh, yeah. But that's also why, like, you need other dudes to step up on your defense. You need your run game. Because, like we saw with 2022, like, they didn't need a run game per se, but they got production in those games to get to where they got. And that's where I think this team... That's the missing piece. And again, I think any Cowboys fan that wants to keep blaming players for going up against good teams, like, I didn't hear Green Bay have this same conversation when they lost to San Francisco in that 2020. Like, no, they were like, hey, we lost, we didn't play well, that's it. It's just because, of course, where the Cowboys were magnified. 2022, you look at the 49ers, they got their ass beat by Philly, but they weren't I mean, they kind of were, because they had no quarterback, but still, they weren't complaining. Yeah. And then the Lions just choked in the NFC title game, and, you know, really bad. And sure, we make fun of them, but, like, again, like, they just kind of move on. I think what Cowboys fans have to do is they have to mature to the point where they got to understand, like, dude, it's not going to be our year every single year. I get it. We haven't been to an NFC title game in 30 years, but when we really think about it, like, Buffalo's made it to it was like 30 or 25 years at that point, and they missed the playoffs for like 20 straight years. No one's talking about them, how they made one AFC title appearance in the last 30 plus years. No one gives a shit.
And
no
they
one
got
cares.
pantsed in that game.
Right.
Like, that's
so no
thing,
one cares.
So that's my thing. It's like, oh, you know, hey, Josh Allen got to a conference championship game.
Like,
okay. And they got pantsed.
Right, like, dude,
like,
no one cares unless you win it all. No one cares unless you win it all. And the last thing I'll say on this point, and, you know, so then we could talk about, like, the rookies and stuff, because I know we wanted to talk about that.
I do want to hit on two more things.
Sure, yeah, of course. I don't want to, you know, mess up anything. I just want to make sure that we get to those things. Is that if anyone knows the Green Bay Packers and the Mike McCarthy era, this is what they were. They were a perennial playoff team that just ran into good teams, or they either choked in certain instances. Like, this is what they were. Like, people need to understand. Like, this is the Mike McCarthy, like, program here in Dallas. Like, we're getting consistent play. Like, listen, that was the barometer. Was like, can we please just get to the playoffs consistently? Now we are, so people are opening their eyes more to be like, all right, like, can we do a little bit better than this? And I think that we also have to factor in that this is Mike's, what, 4th year now? Like,
Yeah.
like, dude, like,
I think I think it
No.
might be his 5th. Is it? Because 2020, 2021,
5th,
2020.
sorry.
Yeah,
The numbers, but anyway.
No, you're good. You're good.
His 5th season, and this dude has 3 straight 12-win seasons, and that's the best the Cowboys have done in the last 30 years. Like, dude, you can't ask for more than that. Like, the Cowboys have the most wins in the NFL since 2021. Like, they're tied with the Chiefs for the most, or they're second or something like that. But yeah, that's why I'm not like so hyperbolic, or some other Cowboys fans that are going on TikTok and they're throwing bitch fits because we didn't win. Not you, of course, but like others.
No,
I've seen they come up in my timeline. And I'm like, bro, like, just calm down. Like, it's not as big of a.
You're gonna wake up tomorrow. You're good.
But people think I'm like trying to like shill for the Joneses, or I'm accepting mediocrity. It's like, dude, I'm not. It's like, it's not that big of a.
12 wins is
like,
not mediocre.
Like,
12
dude,
wins is not a mediocre football team. Trust me. If you want to learn what mediocre is, move on from Dak Prescott. You'll see what mediocre is.
Oh, for sure. Like, anyway, like, what other stuff did you have? For sure.
So one thing I want to talk about is, because I get this vibe, because we both live in the Philadelphia area, surrounding area.
Mm-hmm.
Mike McCarthy to me is what Brett Brown was to the Sixers. He was able to rebuild the team, but I don't think he's a guy that's going to get him over the top. The thing is, where the Sixers went wrong is they hired, a guy who wasn't going to lead them in the right direction after Brett Brown. Now it seems like they got a guy who can lead them in the right direction. I'm telling you this right now. If the Dallas Cowboys want to win a Super Bowl, they got to move on from Mike McCarthy, and they got to go get Ben Johnson in Detroit. They got to go get that guy.
Mm-hmm.
He is Kyle Shanahan 2.0. He is one of the best play callers in football. Everybody's talking about how great Jared Goff is now and how he's better than Dak Prescott. I'm telling you, that's more Ben Johnson than it is Jared Goff. And if you add Ben Johnson to a team that has Dak Prescott as their quarterback, a second-team All-Pro, a guy who I look at as a top 7 quarterback, you're winning a Super Bowl with that guy and that roster, because that guy understands play calling. He understands offensive trends. He knows how to run the football effectively. I have never seen in a playoff game with the Cowboys, with Dak Prescott as a quarterback, a 3rd and 12, and they hand the ball off to a running back and he goes and picks up a first down.
Right.
That happens on purpose because Ben Johnson schemes that thing up. Okay, if they want to win a Super Bowl, go get that dude from Detroit, because that guy is one of them ones.
Of course, absolutely. I think that the thing is like the Cowboys were coming out of a decade of having a coach that literally did them no favors, didn't have a culture of winning, and on top of that, like, the way the coordinators operated impacted how they were as a football team. And you saw that. Jason Garrett had teams where they were extremely inconsistent. People say, well, that happens now. I'm like, well, no. Every team has inconsistencies, but Mike McCarthy does a great job of managing injuries. He does a great job of being able to delegate responsibility appropriately, being able to get this team on the right path to where, dude, he's already out, like, oh, well, they haven't won a champion. Like, dude, I don't care. Like, the fact is if you look at both of their first 4 years, back, if you want to include Jason Garrett's, like, interim, like, as a thing. I mean, dude, we made it to the playoffs 3 straight times, 2 division titles, and the only reason we didn't win it in 2022 was because the Eagles had a fantastic year. I mean, you know what I mean? And so
If Dak was healthy, they win the division that year.
Oh yeah, for sure. So, like, that's where I'm like, dude, like, it's different, like, because, oh, well, they were rebuilding in those years. No, I mean, when you are 8-8 and you have every single year you have a chance to get to the playoffs because your division is that bad, and you don't capitalize it, that's on you, my guy. And that's where it's like, to that point about the Sixers, I always said the Sixers are the version, the NFL, the NBA's version of the Dallas Cowboys, where they will have players get hurt, or their coaching isn't good enough, or they just can't get past the second round for whatever reason, even when everything goes right. And I think to that analogy's, to that point, I kind of felt that Brett Brown and then whoever the next, that's honestly, I personally think we had that. I think that Jason Garrett added the talent because we were rebuilding. He was the Brett Brown to an extent. I think we have the Doc Rivers right now, honestly.
Oh, and I tell people all the time.
I think we have the Doc
Rivers. Mike McCarthy is Doc Rivers. I try to tell people this. He's Doc Rivers of the NFL.
I think that they need to. Granted, we'll see what happens. I mean, the Sixers are in their weird stretch, but I think that they do need a Nick Nurse or a coach that understands. And keep in mind, not to keep talking about the Sixers, but they were a team where they overperformed considering Joel was injured all the time, and you worked with what you had. And you're probably getting a third star this year, which I think would be fun to see with them. But that's where I think the Cowboys need to keep an eye out, is people be like, oh, we're going to fire another coach. It's like, well, when you get 4 years into a coach, or 5 years, excuse me, you already know what you got with the coach. And if it's okay, the players are playing well, it's clearly that's not the issue, but we're running into the same problems, okay, you got to fix that. And so that's where I personally believe that. I don't think that Mike McCarthy is a terrible coach. I think that he is a good floor-setting team. So that's where I'm at.
And one last question before we move on to the rookies here.
Mm-hmm.
If you had, just take your guess, if the Cowboys move on from Dak Prescott in 2025, who do you think is going to be the quarterback?
Cooper. No, I'm just kidding. Honestly, probably Trey Lance. I don't think they want to look like they lost on that. But yeah, I think that it's going to be Trey Lance, honestly.
I'm going to say this. If Dak Prescott is not the quarterback for the Cowboys in 2025, Russell Wilson will be your starting quarterback in 2025.
Yeah.
He will be your starting quarterback because he's not going to demand a high salary whatsoever, on top of the fact that you already also owe Dak Prescott $40 million on the cap. So to the Cowboys fans who want to move on from Dak Prescott, I'm talking to you right now. I hope you enjoy Russell Wilson as our quarterback in 2025 if they do indeed move on from Dak Prescott. That's all I'll say. But also, the idea of Hendon Hooker being the quarterback for the Cowboys if they move on from Dak Prescott is enticing because of his salary, his potential, the fact that the Cowboys did have interest in him in his draft process. That would be another interesting option as well.
For sure. Absolutely. Sorry, I was just taking care. So that's why my camera went off.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good.
Yeah, so let's talk about these rookies, man.
Yeah, so out of all the rookies, I made a list not too long ago on my Instagram ranking the rookies and where I think impact wise they will rank. And I think I'm starting to change my outlook on it. I had Cooper Beebe at 1. Okay. I had Guyton at 2, and then I had Maris Leafau at 3. I'm going to be honest with you. I think Maris Leafau, day 1, will be the most impactful rookie on the Cowboys. And that might sound crazy to say, but every single time I hear people that were at the OTAs talk about the practices, they bring up Maris Leafau. Leafau. He's very smart. He knows where to be. Mike Zimmer loves him. You hear the linebacker coaches and the defensive coaching staff. Mike Zimmer came out and said that the kid is brilliant. When you watch his tape at Notre Dame, there's some serious potential there. They had him all over that defense. They had him blitzing. They had him on the edge. They had him at off-ball linebacker. They had him at safety. They had him doing so many things. And that's because I truly believe Marcus Freeman, a coach that I have a tremendous amount of respect for, really saw a lot in this player to where he thought he could fill so many roles for that team. And I think Mike Zimmer sees him and says, okay, you're going to fill this particular role for this team. And because he's going to be in that one role, and with the fact that, his skill set really complements what Mike Zimmer wants to do in some of his third down and second and long packages, I think you're going to see a big impact day one from Maris Leofau. And he's going to be a guy that's going to be on the all rookie team. And, another point that I just want to add to this is that I love the fact that these Cowboys linebackers now are way more, I think they're going to be more aggressive than we've had in years past. Maris Leofau, DeMarvion Overshown, those are guys that want to get downhill and put a lick on the ball carrier. So I'd go Maris Leofau. I'd probably go Guyton too now, just because I am 100% sure that Guyton starts week 1. I'm not 100% sure BB starts week 1 because, you hear Mike Solari in all of his interviews, and every time he gets a chance to talk about Brock Hoffman, he's talking about Brock Hoffman. Right. I don't like it. I don't want that to be the case. But man, look, I won't be upset if Brock Hoffman becomes a really good center, and now you have a really good center. Oh wait, and we have a guard that can replace Zach Martin. Nobody should be upset about that.
Right, exactly. I think that the thing too is that when you look at what Cooper Beebe can do, is that they might be thinking that hey, Brock Hoffman's going to be our center of the future. We'll have Tyler Smith at left guard, and then we already know where Tyler Guyton's going to go. Maybe even right tackle, depending on what happens with Terrence. You have a lot of combinations that you can do, which is great. But I'm in agreement with you. I think that Leofau is going to be your most impactful player in terms of this draft class because of the time he's going to get out there. On top of that, the position of need as well, so he's going to get that focal point. I think it's look, you get it. Offensive linemen come out and they're impactful A1 day one as long as that they don't just wet the bed. But looking at the rest of the draft class, you got other dudes that are just for depth, right? For right now, Marshawn Kneeland, who I really am high on, and I think that he can develop into something great for you. He's going to be your guy behind DeMarcus Lawrence and company in that edge room. And he's going to take some time. Unless, he just shows up and shows out, and then we're having a different conversation. Kalen Carson, he's going to be a guy that I like him too. I think that he's just a wait-and-see guy, and that could be one of the reasons why the Cowboys haven't brought back Stephon Gilmore.
Stephon Gilmore, yeah.
And then you have Brian Flournoy from Southern Missouri State.
Patrick No-C Walker is saying so many damn good things about that guy, man.
I'm really intrigued.
I'm very excited.
I'm really intrigued what he can do, and I think that he can definitely push the envelope for wide receiver 3 if Jalen Tolbert falls off a little bit. And then we talk about Nathan Thomas and Justin Rogers. Those are just whatever guys. Not to be disrespectful to those dudes. I think they can.
Yeah, for sure.
They can maybe contribute, but again, to me, my philosophy has always been once you get past day 1 and 2, day 3 is just a crapshoot of what you can get for depth purposes, and hopefully you get some starters. And the Cowboys have hit well on late round corners, so I'm hoping that continues with this go around. So I'm really excited about this particular draft class, and I think, to be honest with you, they did a really good job with the trade down. You think about it this way, you got Tyler Guyton and Cooper Beebe together, as opposed to just getting a Graham Barton or another player, which is fine. And I think, like you said, I think Cooper Beebe is at worst. Maybe he's not your center of the future, but he's probably your guard of the future with Zach Martin, right? Because we talk about TJ Bass and is he going to end up being something, which you still have control over him with restricted free agency, but this thing can go many ways, and I think the Cowboys are just covering their bases with this draft, which I like.
Yeah, and look, here's the thing. I do give the front office a lot of slack for the way they handle certain things, but they are very mature when it comes to the draft. Trading back from 24 to 29, hey, look, there's going to be some guys that we want on this football team that are going to get taken off the board. But ultimately, we feel like we can go and address multiple positions with this 24th overall pick, right? Because the 24th overall pick became the 29th and the 73rd overall pick. You addressed your left tackle position and your center position. And look, here's my thing with Guyton. Day 1, I think he'll be a good pass blocker. I think there's going to be some struggles when it comes to, more powerful defensive ends. By the way, I actually met Myles Garrett down. I went to a Mavericks game and I said, like, hey, we got a rookie starting at left tackle. Don't go too hard on us. He's like, oh, trust me, I know. So I it's not necessarily something I liked hearing, but I think Tyler Guyton, his feet are so damn good. He'll be able to stay in front of guys.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a guy like Myles Garrett gives everybody problems, but a Danielle Hunter type, a more powerful type of defensive end is going to give him troubles day one. I think ultimately that'll be worked out, but I think day one he's going to be a good pass protector.
Oh, for sure.
Right off the bat.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, when you look at Guyton's a young guy. He's 21, and he's going to work into it, and typically tackles don't really... Like, there are instances, for example, where guys come in and they're solid. Like, you got Tyler Smith. Like, Tyler Smith wasn't an all-pro guy at left tackle, but he was good. We came to find out, like I said, when we drafted him, where I didn't mind us taking him. However, I felt like he was more of a guard at the NFL level, which we're seeing. And I think that if Tyler Guyton, ends up becoming the guy at left tackle, that's great. If he's good, awesome. You just solved a problem and you let Tyler... And that's the other thing, is just having the reliability of a guy playing left tackle. And us not having to be like, oh my God, for 5 games, we got to play the back. Now, again, anything can happen. But I think that's the other thing we're banking on, is we got a guy that's going to stay upright alongside Tyler Smith. Those two are going to, big dudes. Those two are going to be great to run behind. And then I think the other thing is what happens at right tackle. Like, if Terrence Steele continues to struggle, which we hope he bounces back from the ACL injury, but if he does continue to struggle, do you play Tyler Guyton at right tackle, which is his more natural position, which I wouldn't be shocked at. I think, but then the question is, what do you do? Well, then, like, again, the Cowboys like Tyler Smith's flexibility, right? And I think that what I would probably see is that if there's, like, space, it's the worst case scenario you can ever imagine, and everyone, like, is bad with exception to the rookies. All right, cool. So then you can play Tyler Smith at left tackle, move Tyler Guyton to right tackle. You have TJ Bass or Cooper Beebe as your right guard or left guard, whatever you want to do, and then center's Brock Hoffman. Like to me, that isn't a bad offensive line. I think we've gotten spoiled because of the amount of all-pros that we've gotten over the years past with Martin, Frederick, and Tyron, to where it's like we're expecting this team to have like the best offensive line in football, which you don't need the best offensive line in football to win. But they don't. I think they just need to be able to run the football effectively, which, to be honest with you, those picks very much so. Not only are they keep your like part of it's like, yeah, they're investing in the quarterback staying upright, but another thing is they want to run the football more effectively. And I think that, to me, like, you don't need a lot in that running back room to be effective, but I'm really curious to see how they go about the running back room at this point, because to me, I guess it's a bit weak. I don't know if that would be the right word for it. I think that it's not the best, but
yeah, so. I mean, no doubt about it. I mean, like, when you look at this draft, they definitely did invest in both sides of the line of scrimmage. They want to be a more physical football team. They still got to go get a one tech to just as an insurance policy from Ozzie Smith, but that's besides the point. I look at what this team did in the draft and I say, hey, look, I see a vision, right? You could be looking at the next few years here where the Cowboys have a boatload of cap space. Like I talked about, the $65 million next year, that'll probably dwindle down a little more. Actually might go up a little bit before, all the contracts go through. And then you got 181 in 2026, which will probably go down because of CD and Dax contracts, but you'll still have plenty of money to spend. And then the next year, you're going to have a boatload of money. So, like, I just look at this team, like they're going to, because they're taking a little bit of a haircut this year with, not being able to go sign guys because they don't want to restructure these contracts and, push money off in the future. You could be looking at a team that has a boatload of cap space and some really young difference makers on this team. Because I'm going to tell you right now, when it comes to that offensive line, Tyler Smith very soon might be the best player on the Cowboys. And that's with Dak, Micah, CD, all those guys on the team. He gets overshadowed because of the position he plays and the players that are around him. He is special. He is incredible at his position. You see some of the best defensive linemen roll up against him, and he completely takes them out of the game. Doesn't matter who it is. He, to me, has the opportunity to be the best player on this team very soon, and people might not realize it because the receiver, the quarterback, the edge rusher are always going to be positions that are more more out there compared to just an offensive guard. But man, that Tyler Smith kid is such a damn good football player. I really think they have a special player there.
Oh, I think that this dude was your best offensive lineman last year, considering what 100%. Even considering what Zach Martin's done. I think that that's the thing that people don't realize is like, oh yeah, I know Zach Martin. This probably could be his last year here in Dallas for all we know, right? But the fact of the matter is that you have a dude that's ready to replace him, which is insane to say. Knowing we're talking about the Zach Martin, the dude that's been the greatest offensive lineman that I have seen in my lifetime, that is, okay? Not the greatest offensive lineman ever, but you know what I mean, like one of the best that I've seen. And I think that the fact being that you have a dude that's just on the opposite side that's going to succeed him probably at doing that, and then you got Tyler Guyton, and who knows what happens with Cooper Beebe. I'm just really excited with how they've invested in this offensive line. I mean, you could go look at Pro Football Folk if you believe in those stats that they put out there, because sometimes their grades are a bit wonky for me. But Tyler Smith was your best offensive lineman last year, and that's crazy to say considering he was on the offensive line. So,
yeah, no, he was your best offensive lineman last year. I truly believe that. I mean, look, he is. And this is why. When people say like, oh, why do you keep believing in the Dallas Cowboys? They've shown you for the past 30 years that they can't get to an NFC championship. Okay, what does the 2007 roster, where they don't have a single person on that team on this current roster right now, what does that have to do with Tyler Smith and Jake Ferguson and CeeDee Lamb and Dak and Micah and all these guys? Like, I believe in the players that are on this football team. And like when we talk about this offensive line, not only is Tyler Smith, better than Zach Martin at the current moment, he's in a more important position because he's protecting the blind side. He's on the left side compared to the right side. It would not surprise me if Tyler Smith becomes better than Zach Martin. Like, this is Tyler Smith's first year playing guard since high school. And the guy was an all-pro. Like, it's incredible, man.
And he's like, what, 23? 24?
He was 22 this past season.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
He took Aaron Donald out of the game. When they played the Rams, whenever Aaron Donald lined up against Tyler Smith, it wasn't good. It was not good for Aaron Donald. I just look at this, and that's kind of goes back to my point where I think he's going to end up being the best player on this team. It's going to be like a Zach Martin situation to where like people are like, well, look at Zeke, look at Des Bryant, look at this guy, look at that guy. But in all actuality, the best player was Zach Martin. I think it's going to be the same thing with Tyler Smith because, man, like I said, first year playing guard since high school, I think, and he was an all-pro. I mean, think of this guy with 2, 3, 4 more years under his belt playing guard, getting more reps at that position. He's going to be the best offensive lineman in the league. Like, he's going to be a guy that I think we look at, and he's going to transcend eras when it comes to the way we talk about this guy. And I don't think I'm hyping him up or anything. I just think that this is the reality of the situation with the player. He's incredible. Like, I truly think the world of this guy.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say on him is when what's his name? Zach Martin was coming into the league, he was like 23, 24 when he came, and now like you're having a dude that's been in the league for 2 years now, and he's already getting to a point where he's on a trajectory where if he continues improving his game, he will be better than Zach Martin, which is what you want. And I think the other thing is, look, you got a guy in Tyler Guyton. He's a young tackle, 21. And then you got Cooper Beebe. I think he's 22, 23. So the good news is you are investing with youth on your offensive line, which is huge considering that long term, if you look at how they're going, it's like going younger at that, which we've been like a lot of Cowboys fans have been clamoring for that. Like, hey, we need to get younger on the offensive line. We need to get younger on the offensive line, and they are doing that. And I understand it's not the sexiest picks for sure, but guess what? Like, this is something where if it works out, oh my goodness, like you've addressed two positions on your offensive line in one draft, which is all that you can ask for. And again, they don't need to be all pros to prove that. They just need to be good on film and do their job. As long as they do that, that's all I care for. Like, that's all we need, right?
And one thing I want to touch on when it comes to Tyler Smith,
Sure.
he's a better athlete than Zach Martin. Like he's a more
sure.
gifted athlete than Zach Martin. Like Zach Martin was so incredible because his technique was so incredible. That was a big part as to why Zach Martin was so damn good. Tyler Smith gets to that level of technique along with his natural athletic ability. Like, you know, he's going to be a Hall of Famer as well. You know,
Right.
He might end up being the second best offensive lineman that this franchise has ever seen. I really, maybe I'm hyping him up a little bit too much. I don't think I am. I'm just very, very high on the player. You know, and you know, I'll reiterate it again. I really like the future of this team because of the guys I listed with the 25 and under guys, on top of, I think, a very solid draft class that they just had. And I think some of those guys from the 23 draft will begin to, you know, step up a little bit. Like maybe I think DeMarvion Overshown will step up. We'll see what happens with maybe a junior Fehoko or yeah, you know what? DeMarvion Overshown might be the only one that steps up. Mozzie Smith, I'm just I gotta see it. I'm not sold just because he's coming off that shoulder surgery. And you're, I mean, he's coming off that shoulder surgery and he has a lot of work to do as a player. So hopefully, but I got a question in my chat box. Would you consider trading Micah? No.
I mean, sure, it depends on the offer, but at the same time, it's like, think about it this way. Like, can you think that, hey, if it's like it has to be something ridiculous, like 3 first-round picks.
3 ones.
Sure, yeah.
I will, because 2 1s doesn't get it done for me because you're spending one of those first-round picks replacing Micah Parsons, and you're probably going to replace him with a player that's not as good. And then then you have an extra first-round pick to play with, but it's like I saw Philly get first-round picks and not have to trade a guy like Micah Parsons. So no, I'm not interested in it. And the Cowboys aren't interested in it either. They're not going to move on from Micah Parsons. In the words of John Machota, Micah will be here this year, next year, the year after that, the year after that, the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that until he's done playing. They have no interest on moving on from Micah Parsons, even though like there is some, chatter in the organization about him.
Dude, they're doing that so that they don't have to pay him. Dude, we see the same song and dance, and it's like, this is where it's like, look, I don't even entertain that question because this front office doesn't do anything proactive to put themselves in that position. So, like, dude, I'm not even entertaining that. Like, I understand the question. Like, hey, would I do it? I'd be like, yeah, if it's 3 first-round picks, sure.
Certainly.
But, like, dude, you're not going to get that. And, like, even if it's, like, 2 first-round picks, it's like, dude, like, again, this Cowboys front office will not do that. And I think that that's the other thing is, like, that's why I don't, like, for those that have watched me and are watching me now, that's why I haven't posted much content in recent, because it's the same song and dance with this team where it's like, okay, a player comes up. I said this when Michael got drafted. I said he's going to be well. He's going to win Rookie of the Year, which he did. He's going to do phenomenal for this team. And then when it comes up to his payday, they're going to drag his name through the mud, say what he's doing is ridiculous. Like, oh, like Micah Parsons has a podcast. Dude, all these other NFL players have podcasts, but no one's bitching about that. No one's bitching about the fact that CJ Stroud is going with Micah Parsons to Japan and doing all this other shit, which I don't have a fucking problem with, right?
No.
And it's just so... It's so frustrating because it's like, it seems like it's the same thing over and over and over and over again. Like, dude, no one cares what they do. These are people, like, I see this on Twitter all the time. I understand Twitter is the greatest place for discourse and just fact this, right? Like, do we forget these dudes or people like that do things outside of football? Like just because
They do.
like dude, like just because like Jason Kelsey's out there chugging a beer with his brother or something like that, like dude, no one cares. I mean, it's Philly. No one gives a shit about that. But like when it comes to Dallas, everyone wants these players to act like robots.
And
So
I tell people this. I'm like, when it comes to Micah Parsons and some of the stuff he does outside of football, like some of the stuff on his podcast, I flat out disagree with. I'm like, dude, you shouldn't be saying that. But at the end of the day, when it comes to his podcast, I'm just like, okay, like I know players. So he's not allowed to do a 30-minute podcast every week. You're not allowed to do that. But hey, players can go out and play golf once or twice a week,
right,
which is way more time consuming, so it's just a hobby he does on the side. I again criticize what he says on his podcast. If there's something that you don't like that he said on his podcast, don't criticize the fact that he has a podcast when other players have them.
right.
That's where I come from with that. But there are some things where I really don't like it, and I'm just like, ooh, I don't know, man. Like I don't think that this whole situation where the front office, and this is a topic for another day, but
Right.
I don't like when the front office, when there's people saying like, hey, there's maturity issues with Micah Parsons, I can see where they're coming from, but I think it's some people put the blame in certain different directions, like, oh, he has a podcast, that's why he's immature. No, he's not. Like there, I don't want to get too far in the rabbit hole, but like one example that I had that kind of showed me that, hey, he is a bit immature, is that the whole thing with Skip Bayless. Like I'm somebody that if you make a commitment, stick to the commitment. He went on and said that he was going to do Undisputed with Skip and Shannon. The week after they lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think it was that Wednesday, he was interviewed, and this is when he ducked out on the show. And he said, the reason why I didn't do it is because Dak got injured and we need a leader on this team. I got love for Skip and Shannon. He said all that during his interview. Only to go on a year and a half later and address Skip Bayless and said, the reason you're just mad that I didn't go on your show. And the reason why I didn't is because I didn't F with you. Well, okay, man. Like,
I mean, he
so
probably he probably just said that stuff in the moment just so that he didn't have to come off like a dick in the moment. You know what I mean? I know where he's coming from, but I hear what you're saying.
I don't like, and I know it's funny. Skip, he's annoying. I hate Skip. And I mean, I'm not disagreeing with anything that anybody's saying. If that's the angle they want to go with this, I just kind of say, like, you made a commitment. You're a franchise player. I want my franchise players and, faces of the franchise that if they're going to make a commitment, stick with the commitment. And there's some other things that we'd go down a rabbit hole talking about it. But those are, I don't think it's a completely bogus claim to say that there are maturity issues with him.
Right. I just think it's a problem with how they go about talking about their players.
Yes.
Like, especially Mr. First Question, for those that don't know, David Moore for the Dallas Morning News. This dude gets money on the side from the Joneses to say certain things, so don't be like, a lot of people aren't shocked at it anymore. Like when he comes up with his articles, it's like, dude, it's so obvious, dude, that you're just saying this shit because the Joneses told you to say those things. That's where like it's different in the realm of like Boston sports and like Northeast sports, where like you have because that's just the character of the markets, where they talk bad about the team because they're not doing certain, like, it happens. But for Dallas, knowing that they are the highest branded team in the world and knowing how they operate as a business, again, like, it's one thing when these teams are making moves and doing things, like, you don't really care about that. But the fact that it's every time a player comes up to getting paid, you want to have some hit piece in the media, like, what the fuck are we doing, dude? Like, it's so stupid. But yeah, so
well, and one last thing I do want to touch on here is the wide receiver 3 spot here for the Cowboys. I look at this position and I say right now it's Jalen Tolbert's position to lose, but I'm not counting out Jalen Brooks and Ryan Flournoy and Jalen Moreno Cropper. And, one thing that I think needs to be brought up is that CeeDee Lamb is a very versatile receiver. I want people to understand this. CeeDee Lamb played a lot of snaps in the slot last year because who was going to play in the slot last year? Was it going to be Tolbert? No. Was it going to be Cooks? No. Was it going to be Michael Gallup? No. Those guys aren't slot receivers. CeeDee Lamb can play in the slot. CeeDee Lamb the year prior played 50-50 in the slot. The year before that, you played 70% outside, 30% inside. I think it's 60% outside, 40% inside. So, CeeDee Lamb is a versatile receiver. And I hope that they explore that versatility when it comes to, making a decision in that wide receiver 3 spot. So let's just say Jalen Moreno Cropper breaks out and he's the best out of those guys. He's a slot receiver. Put CeeDee Lamb on the outside, let him play X. I want people to understand this. Everyone's like, oh, he can't play outside receiver, this, that, and third, even though he had like 740 yards and 4 touchdowns and like 58 receptions playing on the outside where he didn't get as many snaps. I think he got like 30% of the snaps outside this year, and he had those amount of numbers. NFL defenses respect CeeDee Lamb's ability to play outside. I want people to go back to, you want to know, and I'll even pull up the tape as we speak right now, just so that I can give people a visual on this, on what I'm talking about. There was a game, week 17, the game that, the Lions are still crying about to this day. I want to pull up this tape because I want to show people something. This is on the fly here. There was a play. It was that Brandon Cooks touchdown.
I know the play you're talking about. Yeah.
CeeDee Lamb playing on the outside and garnering so much attention on the outside is the reason why that play happened, because I got it pulled up right now. We're building the plane while we're in the air. Let me present this to the national public. Okay, cool. Here we go. This is the play. CeeDee Lamb is on the island. He's the X receiver in this play. You got a 3-by-1 set. Okay. Now they have a safety over the top. They have a safety, and then they have a corner up on CeeDee Lamb. They have a safety over the top. Look at the one-on-ones created on the 3-by-1. Jalen Tolbert, one-on-one. Ferguson, one-on-one. Cooks, one-on-one. They're going to run China routes. Both Ferguson and Tolbert are going to run China routes. Brandon Cooks is going to run a corner route. Dak reads this pre-snap. He's garnering 2 guys, CeeDee Lamb on the outside playing X. And you see here, Dak sees this. He knows these guys are going to be running China routes, and he knows, boom, Brandon Cooks right there. So that's the effect that you see from CeeDee Lamb, even when he's not making plays and, making highlights. You see that as an X receiver, an NFL team on a big down said, we're going to have a corner and a safety playing over the top because we need to make sure that he cannot make plays. He baited those guys to that side of the field where they had the 3-by-1 and they had one-on-ones across the board.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, and I think that when it comes to CeeDee Lamb, what makes him so dangerous is his versatility in playing both slot and outside with such elite prowess. I mean, the fact that this dude just catches any balls that are thrown his way, with the exception of a couple, of course. But, this man, we saw him grow up before our very eyes. We saw him, it's just unbelievable. And especially with how young he is and how fast he's climbing up them record books as well, in terms of receiving yards and touchdowns. We've seen this man go from, wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 1 to then superstar level, and now this. It was just an unreal progression. And the fact is that, considering that 92-yard touchdown he had in the same, he had 200 plus yards in that same game, even when he was being teamed the way he was versus Detroit. And I think that shows the great connection he has with Dak Prescott. But then talking about this wide receiver 3, I think another thing that helped him out this year was that you had a dude in Brandon Cooks that was taking attention away from you. And then you also have other dudes like Jalen Tolbert and company. And I know you had Michael Gallup there, but I mean, he wasn't really that effective. I think that what's going to change this year is that Michael Gallup, I don't think is going to be a detriment this year. And I wanted him to recover. It wasn't there. And I think that Jalen Tolbert, I think that he'll be solid for you. Again, we're not asking this dude, not saying we were at any point in this show, but in terms of where I'm looking at it, I just need Jalen Tolbert to be a wide receiver 3. And then looking at, what's his face? The other dudes, like, Brooks. You look at Flournoy, Jalen Cropper. Like, that's a guy I was high on. If those dudes can just give you something, you're good. This team's set. I think the other thing, too, is you really need Jalen Tolbert to take the next step, because the fact being that, after next year, unless you bring back Brandon Cooks is going to be in his last year of his contract this year.
Yeah, no, exactly. 100%. So, you're right. And, I just keep hearing about this Ryan Flournoy guy, and like, you look at his raw athletic score, very impressive. And they're saying like, no, this guy can run routes out there. Mm-hmm. And it's like, man, if you can do that, you have an incredibly impressive athlete who can play the position. That's going to bode well for you. And it's like, ooh, I don't know, man, that Ryan Flournoy pick is looking, he could potentially be a player that we look at and say, he is a player. I look at the wide receiver 3 spot and I see the 4th option on this football team, because I see Ferguson being the number 2 guy. Obviously, Lamb's the number 1 guy. I see Cooks being the number 3. And then I see the wide receiver 3 being the number 4, which makes the position not as important as it would be for a team that doesn't have, a really damn good tight end like Jake Ferguson. Mm-hmm. But, I still want that option to be there, because I want more options on this offense, to where it's like, hey, we're going to take away CeeDee Lamb. All right, well, we have Brandon Cooks and Jalen Tolbert or Jalen Brooks that can work you, or Ryan Flournoy that will give you work if you try and make us play left-handed here, which is what teams do come playoff time. They want you to play left-handed. And I just another thing that I want to look into is this John Stevens kid. Mm-hmm. And I just think that, like, I look at a guy like that, I don't think he's going to blow you away with the amount of yards he's going to get this year, but I think he's going to make plays, and I think he's going to be reliable. He's going to be one of the guys where you watch on tape and it's like, oh man, like 3rd and 8, and Dak kind of just like threw it there, and he came down with a big play here, kind of like how Jalen Tolbert was in spots this year. Jalen Tolbert made some nice plays in spots this year. Mm-hmm. And the difference is a tight end 2 and a wide receiver 3 from what Tolbert was this past season are 2 completely different things. But yeah, to put a lid on the segment, I think they have options, and I don't think Jalen Tolbert should be handed the spot. I do believe, because of his seniority and with the fact that like I said, he made some big plays this year. He should be the front runner for the job, but I don't want the Cowboys to be locked in on that option.
Oh, for sure, and I'm the same way. I mean, you look at a dude at Jalen Tolbert, I think that he's great at being a wide receiver 3. That's, I think, his fit in the NFL level. And I think that will also pose well, like, when he's going for a contract extension, because I think what you're looking for is a guy that, if you're going to pay CeeDee Lamb over 5 years, you're going to need someone that's going to be his partner in crime, whether that be Jalen Tolbert or you go draft another receiver, and you just, like, that's why I was okay with going after a receiver long term, was because, like, with Brandon Cooks, sure, like, short term that helps you out where you're at right now. But long term, you're going to have to figure out who else is going to be that dude. And I mean, again, I really, really can't stress what kind of talent you have in CeeDee Lamb, which also makes it easier to have, like, guys behind him, because you don't need to invest in, like, 2 really good receivers. Now you, like, not like an Amari Cooper or a Michael Gallup, for example. Now you have a dude that's bona fide, like, he's the best receiver in football type stuff. I mean, and I was looking at the stats right here. This dude's already 8th all time in receiving yards, and I believe, I believe for the Cowboys, by the way, not all time, right?
It's
for the
still, that's impressive.
But what's crazy is that he's only, I think, not even 100 yards away from passing Frank Clark, and then after that, there's this gap, and it's a bunch of people with 7,000 receiving yards. But the fact that, by the way, he just turned 25. So we're talking about, like, if he continues his trajectory by 26 years old, he could be on the doorstep of Michael Irvin and Jason Witten. And then not only that, he's on pace to break the receptions record. He's on pace to break Dez's touchdown record. Like, it's like we're watching this dude possibly become the best wide receiver in Cowboys history right before. And again, like, I think that we saw a snippet of what this dude can be at his peak. And I think that the fact that we're seeing it come now, I think that, like, people try to compare him to Justin Jefferson, and people are like, oh, Justin Jefferson's better. I mean, dude, the fact that he's in that conversation for best receiver in the league, and he could have made an argument for all, like, if Tyreek Hill did not have the year that he had, or even Christian McCaffrey, he could have been Offensive Player of the Year. Like, he had a case for Offensive Player of the Year. You know, that's how scary this dude has become. Led the league in receptions, nearly led the league in yards, nearly led the, well, I think he was off by like a touchdown or two, but still, my point is that this team has a lot in this receiving core that they can work with for this year. Long term, I don't know, but but no, yeah. I'm really excited about these young guys. I want to see how they do.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, CeeDee Lamb is, oh man, he's a special player. But yeah, I think that's all I got for today. Mm-hmm. Anything else you want to add here?
I'm good. I mean, I'm just kind of going in this year like I don't care what happens in the preseason. I don't care what happens. I'm just kind of just going with the flow for this year because we kind of know where we're at with this team. And I think, like, I'm not coming out here and be like, oh my God, like, guys, like, look at what's happening. Like, not, you know, clickbait and shit, but like, you know, like, yeah. Because, like, dude,
there's 3-7 in the first 10.
We're going 3-7, but nah, like, I think that last thing I'll say, and then I'll sign out, is that, unless you have anything else, is that, look, you got a good team. Is it going to contend for a championship? I don't know. But to say this team is going to go 9-8, I think is a bit ridiculous. I think that you look at this schedule, I like how a lot of the places that you're going to where you wouldn't want to go in the winter are up front. And I think that that's what I like about this schedule. Don't be shocked. I don't think, will they go 12-5 again? Probably not, because that's hard to do 4 straight years in a row. But if they do it again or do better, that's impressive, and I think they deserve their flowers. But again, I think as Cowboys fans, we have to remember that there are steps that we have to take to winning a championship, and once we get to this 53-man roster, then it's going to be getting the playoff spot that we want to get, and then going from there. I've said that every single year that I've covered the Cowboys is get to the playoffs and just get the matchup you want and go from there. I don't think that it's reasonable to be like, oh, this team's going to do this, or like, and also if you don't think this team's going to win a championship and then they go through the season and you say, all right, you know what,
Super Bowl or bust.
Super Bowl,
they got
right?
No excuses.
Right. They got no excuses, right? And then then the same people get mad that they don't fulfill. It's like, don't set yourself like come on, bro. Like
Stephen A. Smith in 2022. The Dallas Cowboys are not going to make the playoffs. And then he says they choked against the San Francisco 49ers that season, which is weird because it's like, wait, they exceeded your expectations, but apparently, according to you, Stephen A. Smith, they always fall short of expectations. God.
They shockingly they've for the past 4 years they've met my expectations for what I was expecting from this team. Well, aside from last year, of course.
Yeah.
But no, man, it was good chopping it up with you once again. You know, we're now halfway through June. I think, when does training camp start? Is it July 20th or something?
In the 20s, July and like the 20s. Yeah.
Whatever.
I'll be buried in college football 25.
Same.
Wait, what? Oh, nice. CeeDee Lamb made this catch at training camp. Cool. I got a dynasty to run over here. I got a 5-star quarterback that I need to commit. We're on the doorstep here. I can't worry about training camp. I got to make sure that I get the NIL money for this 5-star quarterback.
That's gonna be so fun.
Toledo.
That's gonna be so fun, man. I hope they don't screw it up. please. Just
Oh
fingers crossed.
man, I know.
Just fingers
Oh,
crossed.
no.
But anyway.
Well, all right, bro. It was nice chopping it up.
Of course, but yeah, anybody please make sure to like, subscribe, hit that